Welcome back to my channel, everybody. I'm really pleased that you have joined me here today. I have another wonderful guest to chat to. He's an actor, he's a producer, he's a director, he's a musician. Quite frankly, he should rule the world. Please welcome Richard Green. Hello, Richard.
King Richard. King Richard. If I'm ruling the world, I want
King Richard Green, of course.
I first identified with King Richard the Lionheart when I was growing up. I mean, that was, I did, yes. And if I can take this on a total place you had no expectation of going, Robin Hood, which was produced in England in the late 1950s, the television series, starred a man named Richard Green. I was named after Richard Green.
Were you?
I was, and I grew up, of course, loving Robin Hood. I loved it more when I found out that Robin Hood was written by two blacklisted American writers from who the UAC committee, the anti-communist committee in the 50s, blacklisted these writers. Two of them went to England and wrote about the guy who robbed from the rich to give to the poor, made an incredibly successful TV series, which came back to America. I think it's just beautiful and ironic. It's
beautiful. I think it would be more beautiful if they called you Robin Hood instead of Richard Green. That would have been great.
Listen, what's the next step in my career? Maybe I could change my name and become, well, I don't know.
The next Robin Hood, maybe.
Yeah. Yes, we almost met.
And how are things in LA at the moment?
You know, things in LA at the moment are, they're good. They're opening back up. I'm a little concerned about that because people seem very cavalier about their health and other people's health. But at the same time, it's nice to be able to go some places and do some things. And I must tell you that COVID has affected me in a slightly different way than most of the other people in my life and that I'm aware of in the broader circles of my career and such, because I've had this project. I've been sitting in a cave for 3.5 years.
Yeah.
And when COVID said, you have to stay in your cave, I went, oh, yeah, okay. And you're going to deliver food here too? Oh, okay. It made it, because all these services, it was easier.
Yeah, that was the best part about it, wasn't it? Just getting everything delivered, not having to leave the house. It's great.
Well, and I was doing it anyway. I mean, I had a couple of people in my circle, and I was playing a fair amount of music, but it just kept on. And we're almost at the end of COVID, I pray, and I'm almost at the end of I Know Catherine the Log Lady.
I know, it's very exciting, but we're going to talk about that more later on.
Yes.
So let's talk about you, Mr. Green, the fabulous Mr. Green. Let's talk about you when you were young. Have you always known that you've wanted to work in the arts? Has it always been in your blood, as it were?
I don't think I considered the notion of working in the arts until later in my life. I just was in the arts. It wasn't about work. It was about play.
Right.
The first, I'd love to track it down because the newspaper, it's a local little newspaper, still exists. But the first press I ever got was, I think I was in first grade or before, and I had created a little play with my friends on the lawn of the school and in the bushes. We were using the bushes and the trees as part of the set and background. And there were lines and entrances and stuff. And some photographer for the local paper came by and shot pictures of this. So I think I've been doing this all my life. I think my mom, there's a wonderful British actress, I don't know if you know her, named Tessa Wood. We were very close during the years that I was in London with the Next Step Band. By the way, Roger Daltrey is going on tour, 12-city tour. And the guitarist for Roger Daltrey, the lead guitarist on this tour for one of the great rock and roll frontmen in history, is Doug Boyle, who also was lead guitarist for Robert Plant on his solo tours once Led Zeppelin ended. And he was lead guitarist for Richard Green and The Next Step, which had a really great 3-year run in London in the early 80s. Yeah.
You're going to go and see that then? You're going to go and see Roger Daltrey and the guitarist?
I don't know if they're coming to LA, but if they are, I'd love to see Doug Boyle.
Yeah,
he's a great player.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I totally interrupted the flow there with what you were at.
Not at all.
Me, when I was young, did I know what I wanted to do? I think that my mom wrote a letter to Tessa Wood when I was living in London during those days with Doug Boyle and the Next Step Band and Chris Marshall and some really great players. And she said that when I was 6 months old, I was singing. She would carry me around to burp me or whatever you do with a 6-month-old, but I was literally making melodies. And there are melodies in my head from morning till night. They don't stop. Whether I'm whistling somebody else's tune or something that I'm writing that I can't stop thinking about until I get it out with lyrics and record it on some level. There's music in my head all the time. It's sometimes weird. And it keeps me from other people's music sometimes. It's just, anyway. So did I know that I wanted to work in this industry? I know that I wanted to play, and I knew that I wanted to keep making this stuff. And I loved the accolades when I acted, and I loved acting. But I liked the process of the larger process with acting, which is a wonderful thing to be able to do. It's like a privilege to get to act in material that's halfway decent even. Yeah. It's just a privilege, especially if you're working with other actors who care, because you enter this world of trust and make believe, and and the possibilities and the experiences, the way you see things are endless. Mm-hmm. But my nature is that there's so much going on in my head all the time. I like a larger context. I want to think about that character and all the other characters and the arc of the story and how am I going to do this. So I tend to gravitate toward larger roles in the making of stories, not just the performance, but the writing and the directing and sometimes even the scoring. And that those kind of big things, maybe it's because they're so immense, they take the stress off all the little shit about everyday living, or maybe I'm just a megalomaniac. I don't know.
No, I don't think you're a megalomaniac at all. I think a lot of creatives, I know I think like that. And I'm like you, I have a million, not music, but stories. I have a million stories in my head that I want to tell the world all the time. And sometimes it's actually overwhelming, isn't it? It just completely bogs your head down. But I always think about that, especially if I'm writing, because I formally trained as an actor. I'm always thinking, I'm playing the scene out as I'm writing it in my head. I'm directing it as I'm writing it. So no, I completely understand that. And I think most creators would probably understand that as well.
Well, I would say I had a really great experience with a high school English teacher 40 years later or something, comes back into my life when my son is 16 years old and has this incredible inspired experience with my son, and we reflect on what my career has done over these years. And when I knew he was coming to town, I remembered something that he said to me when I was 16 or 17, and I was in his class, and we were discussing radical education and Summerhill, A.S. Neil Summerhill, which took place in England. It's about experimental education. Yeah. He handed me that book and turned me on so deeply into experimental education that I quit high school after that year, my junior year, and went to an experimental school where I became a teacher. So I don't have a high school diploma. I got a college degree from Cal Arts, but no high school diploma. But when I knew he was coming to town, we hadn't seen each other in years. And I remembered he said to me, he said, really be careful, because I had just made my first film. I was writing songs and I was acting. And he said, you be careful that you don't become a jack of all trades, master of none. So 40 years later, this guy's coming to town and I'm going to have lunch with him. And it turns out he's going to stay with my house for 6 months. But I think about that and I thought, Jesus, did I do that? Did I fuck up? Did I become a jack of all trades, but a master of none? And then I went, no. And because I believe the thing that I became closest to being a master of is storytelling. And like all artists, painters, everybody, musicians, it's the art is in what you need to, how you see the world and how you see the need to, how you express it. The techniques you use are varied. Picasso painted and sculpted and drew and probably did sandcastles. Musicians play 20 different instruments in 30 different styles. Actors, until the 20th century, when we started capturing theater on film, right? And one eye had to decide where that camera was going to be and what the next shot was going to be. When one person decided that, as opposed to an audience from different perspectives watching something happen live, that's the first time we had directors. Yeah. Before that, we had writers and actors. They were all kind of one. You'd get into Shakespeare was an actor in the company. Who told who where to stand? Yeah. The guy with the biggest mouth, or the woman with the biggest mouth. Whoever was the best actor or most popular got to get to say who should do what. pushed people around, but you were still all creating individually on a stage for an audience who was seeing it in different places in their own time. They were looking where they wanted to look. If they wanted to watch that character, they could. Once we moved to film, you can't watch that character if I got a close-up of that one.
Yeah.
Right? We lose the storytelling collaborativeness when we move to film, and a director or producer or whoever's controlling the last thing the audience, the first thing that goes to the audience and the last thing, they become the point of view. So I think we're all, I'm a storyteller, and I can tell stories musically. I can tell stories editorially. I can tell story acting. Am I great at any of them? That's not for me to judge. Have they supported and encouraged me to keep going? With enormous struggles that any artist who's trying to do something beyond just getting paid to do what they want you to do. If you're trying, for me, I was very lucky. And I guess this comes back to your question about work in the industry. For me, I realized that I could sell the skills that I was developing as an artist. I could sell those same skills to Hollywood, right? I could use my voice to sell products. I could play roles for them, right? But I wasn't making art. It was commerce or entertainment or something else, right? Sometimes I did. I mean, there's a handful of roles, you know, the one that you know me for most, being the most prominent time that I ever got to just make art on film and not worry about anything else other than how do we make this everything it can be. Just that's what David wants. That's what I wanted. That's what he wrote. That's what I interpreted. That's what we were able to do. But most of the time it's just, you know, here's this car and you want people to buy it and you're going to hire me to tell them about it. I'll take the money, but I won't confuse it with art. That's work. And I'm able to take the same skills that I need to make my art and keep them in shape, same equipment, same microphone, right? I can make songs with, and I can sell to somebody else. Not that I make that many commercials these days. It's a very different world, right? And my time is spent mostly on, I know Catherine the Log Lady, but to me, as long as, if you're an artist, it's really simple. You want to be an artist, it's like really, it's the simplest thing in the world. Just make art. And how do you make art? You just make something that's primary focus is to express something. If that's what its primary function is, not to sell, not to entertain, not to distract, not to decorate. If its function is to express something, it's art. If you're 7 years old and you express what it means to be a tree, that's art. And if you're 70 years old and you write, you know, the next Crime and Punishment, that's art. And if you make a beautiful garden and you're just trying to make it beautiful and it rises above just its function of beauty and expresses beauty beyond, it's art. It's not a big deal. Just make art and you're an artist, period.
Absolutely. No,
whatever the hell you have to do for a living. And I got to sell fucking cars or whatever it is they want me to sell.
I try to think of all the jobs that I've done. I've worked in a chocolate factory. That was rather enjoyable, I have to say. I've been a tour guide. I've been a Jack the Ripper whore at the London Dungeon. So we all have to do what we have to do, basically, don't we? But you mentioned a minute ago about the Cal Arts, and I wanted to touch a bit. You went to the California Institute of the Arts, and it's quite a prestigious school, that one, isn't it? It's had some amazing people there, like Tim Burton, Sofia Coppola, David Hasselhoff, in fact. I know. Love David Hasselhoff. I know when I went to drama school in London, I was at a point in my life that I needed the training, but I also needed the discipline as well. I needed to kind of know how to behave when I was in the business. You know, did you find that you needed that kind of discipline as well? And sort of how much of that original training at college have you taken into your career?
So I could give you a snap answer, or I could give you a kind of an in-depth answer, because I thought about this. Cal Arts was a singular experience, and I didn't go there out of high school. No. Right. As I said, I left high school after my junior year and went to an experimental school where I was introduced. I was further educated in improvisation. I had worked with, the woman Lorraine Newman from the original Saturday Night Live.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
She and I went to high school together, and she had invited me one summer to study mime and improv with a fabulous teacher by the name of Richmond Shepard. Right. And Lorraine, I think later she went on to study with Marcel Marceau in London in Paris before she came back went to Saturday Night Live. She was a great mime, probably still is. So we had started, and then when I was at the LA Free School, I was introduced to people from the Credibility Gap, or Synergy Trust, which was another improv group that had some really interesting people from Second City. So I started getting into improvisation at this LA Free School, which was just wide-ranging, free. The whole idea of it was, if you know what you want to learn, you can learn it, and we can give you the tools that you need to learn it. So if you're a 12-year-old kid and you want to be a chemist or a physicist, let's see if we can get you some classes at UCLA if you can keep reading, and we'll help you do all that shit. That's what motivates us to build. So they just motivated me that anything I wanted to do, I could do. And I did some cool stuff with them, and then moved on to San Francisco, started a theater company that came out of a theater company that Catherine had been in. That's all touched on. Yeah, it's really kind of extensively with
Catherine Coulson, the log lady from
Catherine Coulson, the log lady. She grew up in Southern California. Her father was the head of PR at Disneyland. Wow. She grew up in Disneyland.
Yeah, I knew that. Yeah.
And she, it's because I interviewed you and I mentioned
you told me that. I remember that.
Talking about this. This is like bombshells.
Worlds collide.
Disney, just so you'll know, Disney weaves its way through all of, I know Catherine the Log Lady. Disney keeps coming back in different forms and for different reasons. It's really interesting. I must tell you, just because we touch on it, it's the most fascinating project I've ever worked on. I've never been this far into somebody else's life with this close to so many people who were so engaged and have so much material that exists of her life, right? You know, as a theater person, right, if you're doing 5 roles a year in repertory for 22 seasons, you're going to get up to 5 roles. You're going to get 80, 90 roles, right? And in every one of those roles at that highly prestigious repertory company, make sure that they, at the dress rehearsal, have a top-notch photographer capturing that dress rehearsal. You're going to have thousands of pictures of Catherine Coulson in 10, 20, 30, 50, 60, 100 roles. It's extraordinary.
Yeah.
It's extraordinary.
We'll talk about Catherine a bit more later on.
Yeah, sorry, I keep coming back to Catherine.
It's okay. I get caught up talking about her because she was so wonderful.
Yes.
But,
yes.
Okay, so your initial training, do you find that as you went into your career after you went to Cal Arts, did you find that sort of discipline and the work that you did at Cal Arts, you took it into your career, your early stages of your career with you?
So again, let me finish answering your earlier question.
Yeah, sorry. Because you did the street in San Francisco as well, didn't you?
Yeah, so I moved up to San Francisco and started doing street theater. Started doing improvised verse in the streets. I had an act. I had an English accent based on I believe it's a Lancashire accent based on my loving of Stan Laurel when I was growing up, right? And I would start. Huh?
Can you still
do I do it now? No, you're going to tell you. No way. I'm going to talk to it. No. Not unless I can cut and paste all of the good parts and get rid of all the bad parts. I'm a filmmaker. I'm not a fool. But it was based on sort of Stan Laurel's Lancashire accent, and it started at the Dickens Fair. The people who do the Renaissance fairs in Los Angeles and San Francisco that invented this concept of Renaissance fairs, Theme Events Limited, they started a Dickens Fair in San Francisco, and they did it at the coolest of places. I don't know if you know where Ghirardelli Square is in San Francisco, but it's right at the pier. You can see at the wharf, right on the bay. You can look out and you can see the Golden Gate Bridge. There's a pier there called the Hyde Street Pier, and at the Hyde Street Pier there are 3 128-foot masted clipper ship and a big ferry boat and another boat, and we took this whole thing over eventually. But there's also, across from Ghirardelli Square, which is the old Ghirardelli's chocolate factory, that's now a shopping mall with fancy shops and a hot chocolate shop. Nice. Across from that is the old cannery building, this huge brick warehouse where it was a cannery where they would can all the food, the fish that were coming in. It was abandoned, and they took over the basement of it, which is all old wood and cobblestones and brick on the wall, and they turned it into Dickensian London 4 nights a week over Christmas.
Wonderful.
Right? And it was fantastic. And this got me connected to a whole bunch of really interesting people. I I had gotten a job. I had just arrived in San Francisco. I'd gotten a job doing children's theater going to parochial schools in a van with a guy who had studied with Max Reinhardt, this guy, Ernest Lahner, Bay Area Children's Theater or something. Half the actors from the Bay Area worked for this crazy man and went around in a van doing parochial schools, right? So I'd gotten the job and I was in rehearsal, but they weren't paying me. And I heard about the Dickens Fair and I went there to see if I could get a job. And I told them I could improvise songs. And I sang a song that I had written. "'Tis the duty of a bureaucracy to support the local aristocracy, to keep the rebels in the clink and the nobles in the pink, and appease the idle peasants' curiosity." So I sang that and told them that I could improvise like that. And so they gave me a big top hat and said I could pass the hat. And I was there because I was broke.
Right.
So the first guy I walked up to in the Dickens Fair, right? I'm in cut-off gloves and a muffler and everything else. First guy I walk up to says he'll buy me he'll try this improvised verse, and it was horrible. I couldn't do the rhyming and the music at the same time on his subject, and it was awful. And he said, "That was terrible, but I'll buy you a beer." So I had a beer, and I calmed down, and I dropped the music, and I started just going up to people as this character, Wilbert W. Williams. My name's Wilbert W. Williams. Just call me Willie if you like. Call me Willie once, would you? Call me Willie.
I want me to call you Willie.
Yeah, would you?
Hello, Willie.
Oh, thank you very much. And then I would get a subject from you, and I would just start talking in rhyme until I could sort of tie it off. And it became a thing. So I started making good money. I went and did 3 months with the parochial school. It was awful. I quit, and I went to do street theater in San Francisco. Anyway, that led to a theater company with people that Jack Nance worked with us a little bit. Wayne Grace worked with us. It was a wonderful theater company, Theater of Marvels in San Francisco. And then it was 1972 or 73 or something like that. And the idea, if you were a hippie in 1973, and I was, in my late teens, right? You go to Europe for a year and you hitchhike around and you travel the world and see if you can find your way. And I knew if I didn't do it then, I'd never do it.
Right.
So I left. I came down to LA and ended up, that's when I met David Lynch and Catherine Coulson. I was on the bill of the Mayfair Music Hall. They had done an English-style music hall in Santa Monica, California. They hired a British actor named Bernard Fox to be the chairman of it, right? The people that did the Magic Castle here, which is still standing and beautiful, the designer of it was a guy named, can't think of his name, but he did all of Johnny Carson's sets and props and stuff for 30, 40 years, this guy. And he designed the Magic Castle, and he turned this old Santa Monica theater into an English-style music hall. And it was perfect for ladies and gentlemen, may I take this momentous moment in time to introduce myself. My name is Richard Edward Green, and I am an actor. I can tell an improvised story in verse upon any subject in the whole entire world, a subject, if you please. Right? That was and then they would throw me words, and I'd get all cute and try, Anyway, and then I spent a year in Europe, and in that year in Europe, I decided that I needed to go to school to study acting. And the reason why is if I improvised it or I wrote it, I knew what to do. But if you gave me George Bernard Shaw's, anything, I didn't know how to break into that character and understand how to deal with the structure of the play and I didn't get it.
Yeah.
And
different styles, different playwrights, and yeah.
And different techniques. I had no technique for penetrating a script, and I wanted to move on to writing and directing. And I felt I would be foolish if I didn't master acting to some level before I moved off to something else. So for a year while I was traveling, the only acting school that I knew that was any good was Yale, right? I'd heard that Yale was the best drama school, right?
Right.
So for a year, I kept writing letters that I never sent, trying to explain that I could improvise verse, and I left high school to go to an experimental school. So I don't have a high school diploma, but you should take me into Yale and let me come and go to school. And I did. How do you send that letter? I would talk about, when I was a kid, I did these, I never sent the letter. I come back to Los Angeles after a year. My father had had a stroke I didn't know about, and had invented an electronic device that would eventually go public and be the #1 traded stock on NASDAQ. But the guys he was working with were trying to steal it. He was sick. I came in strong, 21-year-old son back from his travels of the world. I'm going to get my dad healthy, and I'm going to get those patents for him and help him. And I did, right? But it meant I was staying in LA, and I started looking for jobs. And I remember going downtown to a uniform company, downtown LA, to see if I could get a job folding shirts. You know, I had one job in my life that wasn't entertainment or writing related, right? It was a shoe salesman for 2 weeks. And then I remembered Cal Arts. I remembered that when I was at the Free School and they opened the campus in Valencia and Ravi Shankar played, the whole LA Free School, like 30 of us or whatever, got in the bus and went up to see Ravi Shankar play. And I thought, maybe, and I remember exactly the date, it was September 3rd. I picked up the phone, I called Cal Arts. They put me down to the theater school. I talked to this woman, Gillian, an African-American woman who later went on to work with the San Francisco Mime Troupe. And she says, it's really weird that you're calling. We have a new dean. And the new dean is coming in, and on Saturday, 2 days from now, on the 5th, he's having a last-minute audition because he wants to bring in a couple of students with him. So if you can get up here in 2 days, you can audition. And I'm, yeah, okay. So 2 days later, I drive up, it's the guy's name is Robert Benedetti, and the first thing we do is we do our 2 scenes. And what I did was this theatrical performance of Adam and Eve and that character that you saw before, that, you know, and a Richard III monologue. And then Robert Benedetti puts us through a Grotowski-esque kind of training. He has us in a circle and he's giving us directions. And I felt like I was a racehorse being trained by a master. He was throwing shit at me and I'm like, we're just rocking. It was amazing. It was this wonderful experience of connecting with a director who's throwing you stuff and you're just going with it. And I had been trained in that kind of openness, and I was an improviser, so it was easy, right? We go to the lobby next, the small theater lobby right next to his office. And we're all going to now wait and have a private interview. There's like 8 of us or something, right? And I read the little card, the little, you know, paper they put up for the returning students about who their new dean is, right? Because he's the new dean. He's coming in for the first time. So there's a little thing for all the students. And it says, Robert Benedetti, who studied and trained at Carnegie Tech, for the last 3 years has been the dean of acting at Yale.
Oh my gosh.
So the guy that I was writing a letter to for a year that I never sent is the guy that I then sit down in front of, who says to me, you're 21 years old, you've had a professional career in San Francisco, you have great reviews from doing your improvised verse here in Los Angeles, variety. We're talking about, you know, what are you doing here? Why do you want to come to school here? And I told him, because I don't know how to break down I don't know how to be the actor that I want to direct.
Yeah.
Right. But I want to make film. And he said, and I said, I have no money. And so he does these calculations, and then he says, I can't give you 4 years worth of scholarship and housing. I can't. I don't have the money. But I'll make you a second-year student. So I can give you 3 years. And I'll make sure that you can make films while you're here. He didn't know what the fuck he was talking about. To make those films was like, it was subversive land, right? But this man saw what I was doing and gave me that opportunity.
Incredible.
So you asked me if I learned discipline? No. What I learned is hustle. What I learned is a school like Cal Arts is a microcosm of the entertainment world here. There's a bunch of people who already have enough money to be in school. It was a fucking expensive place, and it's crazy now, right?
Yeah.
And there are a bunch of producers here in LA and people whose parents are supporting them, or, you know, and then there's people who are just working to make living. And if you get on a good union gig, you can have a nice living as long as there's work. And then there's this crapshoot of hustling writers and directors and actors and people who get hot for a minute and if they're lucky, have the right management and help to take advantage of it. It's a big game, right? And it's not based on art. It is show business here. No question. Absolutely no question about it, right?
Yeah.
So you asked me if I learned discipline at CalArts? No. I learned hustle at CalArts. I learned that that the only way that I was going to get my film done and all this thing done is if I use my New Yorker, I'm a Brooklyn boy, you know, I walk 3 times as fast as most people walking down the sidewalk, and I'm happy to jog and, you know, to get where I need to go, because that's what it takes. And that's the same thing in the real world.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I mean, obviously I lived in London 23 years. I know how to hustle too.
Well, you know, you're an extraordinary entrepreneur.
Thank you.
Right? I don't know all of the works that you've done. I know that the festival, which I thought was just incredibly beautifully run and artistically classy and true to the spirit. It was so beautiful. Yeah, it was amazing. It was wonderful.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
And, you know, and I think you were appreciated worldwide by a lot of people for doing something just beautiful and classy. Anything that you do coming in the future, I know will be done well, and you'll find enormous amounts of support from anybody that you've worked with, because you've earned it.
Thank you, Richard. I really appreciate that. Thank you. Well, let's carry on. Now, of course, you appeared in lots of TV roles. You've done lots of voiceovers, which we're going to chat about. You've done lots of film, but as you mentioned earlier, you are, of course, famous for one role in particular amongst a certain group of fans, I guess, and that is, of course, the magician in Mulholland Drive. David Lynch's Mulholland Drive. Now, that scene that you appear in with Rebecca Del Rio, I mean, it's an iconic scene. It's well known, isn't it, worldwide? It's an incredible scene. Can you talk a little bit about the process of working with David Lynch and Rebecca Del Rio, who's our mutual friend, of course? I love Rebecca. She absolutely makes me cry to the point of laughter. Makes me laugh to the point of crying. She's hilarious. But can you talk a little bit about the process of that scene? Because it's so loved by all the Lynch fans and beyond. It would be great to get a little bit of an insight of what sort of behind the scenes insight.
I also adore Rebecca Del Rio. We did not really work together. We were in the same theater, in the same sequence, but you know, we shot my scene a couple of times, and then we shot her introduction and her scene. I will tell you that the first time I ever heard her version of Girondo, of Crying, was on enormously high quality, loud speakers being broadcast in the Tower Theater when she came out and lip synced it.
Wow.
Right? That's the first time I'd ever heard it. And it was, you know, John Neff is a brilliant engineer, producer. Yeah. He's a brilliant guy, humble.
Very brilliant.
But how he recorded that vocal in David's booth, and how they played it in that theater, and the acoustics of that theater, it took my breath away. It took my breath away. So we met briefly, you know, that was it. We didn't get to know each other until years later. We would see each other on rare occasions. But I think we started to become friends at Justin Johnson's Halloween party, which she happened to be in Nashville for, and I was there to recreate the magician for that Halloween party for Justin and Nikki, who were big backers and supporters of I Know Catherine the Log Lady's, you know, campaign. Yeah. I don't know if I've ever told much of the story. I may have, and I don't want to go too deep into it. I hadn't spoken to David since Jack Nance's memorial, which was in Pasadena. And at that memorial, I saw David, and he said, "Richard, I remember you, and I don't remember how you know everybody." And I told him this story about being in another fair in San Francisco, which is actually the fair where I met everybody that eventually led to Theater of Marvels, playing an evil magician. And I told him how when I was like 11, I designed a 7-foot gallows as a magician's act, right? That had a noose and a curtain that would go halfway, and a box and a rope. And I would come out as the great Abraxor, right? Stolen from Hermann Hesse's book, right? And I would just, I'd snarl at the audience and just be comically mean. And then they would handcuff me or tie my hands behind my back. I would stand on the box. The noose just went around my neck. It was obviously tied off to the post at the top of this gallows. A curtain 4 inches below the noose came down just 3 or 4 feet, so you could see my legs and my weight from below my waist.
Right.
You couldn't see my, and the rope was given to somebody in the audience, and we would count 1, 2, 3, and I would say pull, and they would pull the box out from under my feet, and I would die. My feet would start kicking. I would get, and then and they'd hear this horrible. I mean, I really milked it for everything that you could milk it for. Fake death with just your legs and your voice behind a curtain. And then, of course, they would lower the curtain, and I would pop out healthy and wise, right? So I told David about this, and he's real big on building things. So I think that kind of got his attention. At the end of the memorial, where if you haven't seen I Don't Know Jack, it's a Next Step Studios production about Jack Nance that Catherine helped make happen. At the end of it, you see a little bit of what happens at the very end of that memorial, and Neil Moran talking about the fat lady singing, because it was arranged at the end of that memorial. A very large woman with an amazing big voice gets up and sings, and then we know it's over. It was a beautiful way to end the movie. Chris Levins is a wonderful director. Mike Wargrove, great editor, and amazing way to end that. At the end of that, I took a 2-hour book on tape version of 7 Year Zigzag, my rhyming film about trying to start the new swing music movement in the early 80s. And I gave it to David. 2 years later, he called me up on a Friday afternoon. This is after having to sort of go through Catherine up in Oregon to find that guy that was really good with words and used to do magic, right? And I calls me up at 3 p.m, and he says he has this role. He's always wanted to work with me. It was great. It was very comfortable. He's a very comfortable person to talk to. He's so present, it seems, that he just makes you comfortable. And he wanted to do it on Monday, and I'm going, yeah. Of course, send me the script. No, I'll send you the side. I can only send you the scene. Okay, no problem. Send me the screen. And can you do costumes tomorrow, Saturday? Sure. And he said, oh, and by the way, I want it French and Spanish too.
Of course.
It's Friday afternoon. We're shooting on Monday. You want it French? Do you have a translator? Well, I don't, but here's my home number, which I still have. I called trying to get to the office the other day, called the wrong number. And of course, Emily answered because he gave me his home number, but he didn't answer that day. And so I had to have 2 friends translate this 7 pages of monologue into French and Spanish. And then this was now Saturday night, and I got to shoot this on Monday. It's 7 pages of dialogue. Is hard to, monologue is hard to remember anyway, but in 3 languages. So I don't know why I had the temerity to do this, but I thought the easiest thing for me is if I make it all one scene, right? Choosing when it should be French, choosing when it should be Spanish, what I reiterate, how it sounds, just working as kind of a jazz musician or an arranger would a piece of material. Not knowing whether David would want to do this, but I basically typed up a 21-page script and a 10-page script, or a 30-page script and a 10-page script. And when I got there that morning, there at the Tower Theater on this stage, and I said to David, here's the English, Spanish, and French version. Here's 30 pages. And then I kind of made I didn't know what I even called it. I just said, I kind of put it together. Sometimes yes, let me see that. And I then performed the piece. Wow. And he loved it. It was the most immediate, the heaviest hit of approval and encouragement, the best audience I ever had. Right then, that minute, when he dug what I had just done, that I'd spent the weekend on, that he had written, that I had arranged, if you will, as into these languages as he asked. And I think we made, one change. I think he wanted me to come downstage to that microphone. I swoop in on a microphone at one point. It was just a grand thing. You know what it's like to perform. When you're in it and it goes and the piece itself works, you can just feel the energy from anybody in the room, and everybody was there. And I could feel that, and it was wonderful. And it allowed me to do something which I don't know where I'd be right now, or what I'd be doing right now if without that film. It didn't really impact my career in any positive way, except might have kicked my voiceover career a little bit. Some people really liked that I was in that film. I didn't have good management and agents at the time to take advantage of it. I think I thought, oh, this is going to lead. I'll be the bad guy in the next series of Halloween movies or something. Nothing, right? But it allowed me to do something that I needed to do, which is to feel like, okay, I've hit a certain mark. This is film history here. This film won the Palme d'Or, and later it became even more renowned. If I never do anything else, I've done that, and I don't think there's anybody who could have done it the way I did it, because of all the elements of my life, the theater, that the Tower Theater. I was mentioning that the Mayfair Music Hall earlier on in Santa Monica. John Shrum was the art director for Johnny Carson and the Mayfair Music Hall and the Magic Castle. John Shrum. That looked exactly like the Tower Theater. So David had me playing an evil magician with jazz music behind me, and that's what 7 Year Zigzag is all. It's me talking in rhyme over swing and jazz, right? It was just all these elements of stuff that he had experienced of me that came together somehow or other. We ended up in that place, and it was the best thing I've ever done. And if I never acted again, I knew that I could move on to something else if I wanted to. Personally,
it's an incredible film. And actually over here, the BFI, the British Film Institute, named it the best film of this century. Like that's how loved it is over here. So to be part of that as an actor is something so special. And like you say, if you never work again, how incredible to have that on your CV. Like, it's just beautiful.
I will say, and not to bring us back to Catherine again, but when I went to see him, I hadn't seen him in years, a number of years, when I went to interview him for I Know Catherine, the Log Lady. His was the first interview I conducted. There were some other interviews conducted by someone else, but my first interview was with David. And he came in, he gave Donna Dubain, who's one of Catherine's oldest friends and the producer of I Don't Know Jack, and our executive producer as well, one of ours. He gave her a big hug. He saw me, he said, "Hello, Richard." Went up the stairs in his, you'll see where he's interviewed is his screening room, and it's also the recording studio, mixing board and everything. Beautiful. He went up the stairs and he turned and he went, "No hay banda." So it set the mood for when he sat down for maybe the most intimate interview I've ever conducted. It's just what I felt. I hope that he feels the same. I know the people who have seen this interview are blown away by it. I felt that I was the same audience for him in this interview. That same quality of attention, the same two eyes that were back and forth with each other as he was for me on Mulholland Drive. Right. As much as he was engaged with who I was and what I was doing and understanding it and having created it, written the scene that I was interpreting, right? As much as he got it and made me feel like, man, you just, aces, Richard. I felt like that's who I was for him in that interview. And it's a beautiful interview about someone that he loves dearly. And somebody's just amazingly unique. And these stories, and David Lynch is maybe one of the best storytellers in history. And I'm not talking about with film. He's just
love to hear his stories. I love to hear his stories. Great. Yeah.
He lives, he's so present. You're with him. He's re-experiencing these stories. It feels like it. Like good storytellers do that. That is
the word to describe him, actually, present. A lot of people use that word to describe him. It's great.
I think.
Yeah, sorry, I was saying, continuing sort of in the Lynch world, and you mentioned it earlier, we mentioned Jack Nance. You then, of course, made the Jack Nance biography, basically.
Yeah.
And what made you want to tell Jack's story?
So, okay.
In fact, for anyone watching who doesn't know who Jack Nance is, he played Pete Martell in Twin Peaks, but of course he was hugely famous for playing Henry in Eraserhead, which is, in my opinion, one of the best films ever made.
And in Dune. He's in Dune. He's in Lynch's version of Dune. It's really wild in that.
And I mean, his story is a hell of a story, isn't it, really?
Oh, it's a great story. So I'll tell you what made me this in Pasadena, the memorial that I was telling you about, where I saw David after those years, and I gave him the audio book and the magician idea. Afterward, I invited everybody back to my place in West Hollywood. I had a studio behind a house, and we were used to having people. And so David didn't come, but if of the 80, 90 people, 100 people that were there, probably about 50 or 60 showed up at my house a couple hours later, an hour later, right afterward. And we just had a, you know, these are all hippies from San Francisco. We had a very stony, late, drunk, music, laughter, wonderful bacchanal in Jack's honor. It was beautiful. And I remember thinking, Jesus, we could tell just interview everybody here. You got a movie, right?
Yeah.
I thought about it. No, actually, I take that back. I didn't think about it at the time. I just experienced it. I did remember thinking that we should have a camera here, but I didn't go any further. Then I hired an assistant, 23-year-old kid. We actually didn't hire, we had called a temp agency. I needed somebody to be able to do some After Effects and some video editing for me. We called a temp agency. We didn't like how much they were charging, and so we canceled it. But he heard about it and came to the door. Even though we canceled it, he came to our door. And I said, I can't hire you because of the temp agency, but there's a cafe down to the corner. And I usually go down and have a cup of coffee in about 10 minutes. And if you're down there, we could have a chat, and then I could hire you. Right? So Chris Levins goes to the coffee, comes back, and we hire him. A week, 2-3 weeks later, I'm sitting in my office. I've got Valerie Phipps Wilson, Frankie Wilson, who's in Eraserhead, big, enormous English woman. And she's in my office, and Donna's in my office. And I think Eugene Stillman calls from San Francisco, and we start talking about Jack, right? Having died, and that Gene hadn't come down for the memorial. And Chris Levins is the biggest Eraserhead fan in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where he grew up and went to school. And he hears the name Jack Nance, and he's like, is that Jack Nance Eraserhead? Yeah. And Frankie was in it. And he's like flipped by this. The next morning, I'm making coffee, and Chris Levins comes in and says, you know, Jack Nance's life and unsolved homicide, I don't think he knew it was an unsolved homicide at the time. Jack Nance's life and death would make an interesting documentary. And I, at the time, was gearing up to shoot my feature, 7 Year Zigzag. And I thought, documentary, all I'd have to do is have another party, and I could interview everybody at the party, just like the movie. And was at this cheap, yeah, sure, why not? And I went to David Lindemann, who was a director in San Francisco for the theater company that Catherine was in and that Jack was in, and is the guy that introduced David Lynch to Jack Nance and Catherine, right? And I asked him if he wanted to be involved, and Donna was going to executive produce with him, and we got Catherine, and Catherine wanted to get involved, and all of it. And I told John Acorn, who's in that film, and in I Know Catherine, of all the people I interviewed from Catherine, aside from her niece, Connie, John Acorn knew her the longest. They met when they were both in college at Claremont, Scripps College at Claremont, California, a little east of Los Angeles. Anyway, John Acorn said, call it I Don't Know Jack, and let the kid direct it. And I thought, this is great. A 23-year-old kid wanders in with an idea, gets to direct his first feature. Beautiful, right? Because I was going to direct something else. So that's how that came about. Catherine was instrumental in getting us to David and having David agree that we could do it and use footage from Eraserhead. And I wasn't at the interview with David, but it was a lovely interview. Chris Levins conducted. It's a good film.
Fantastic.
Did I answer your question? I don't even know.
You did. No, absolutely did. Catherine, of course, I don't think we mentioned, she was married to Jack Nance, of course.
Yes. Yes.
So let's talk about Catherine, and let's talk about this amazing project that you have created called I Know Catherine, the Log Lady, and it is a biography of Catherine Coulson's life. She, of course, passed away very sadly in 2015. We both miss her very, very much. She was a wonderful friend to me as well. For you personally, this has been a hell of a journey, and this has literally taken you to people all over the world. People all over the world know about this film and have supported it. Of course, there was a huge Kickstarter campaign, which was hugely successful. I mean, let's talk about it. Where did the idea come from? How are you feeling? How is it doing? Tell us about it.
You know, the idea hit me the day Catherine died.
Right.
Which was in 2015, September 28th. Technically, it was just right after midnight on the 27th. I got a call from Donna. I was aware that I knew that they had shot 4 days before, and that everybody was super sworn to NDAs, and she couldn't tell me about it. She wasn't there, and she barely knew. Somebody close to Catherine that was there had given Donna some info, and so she was giving me some info. And immediately,
when you say she was shot, she was shooting Twin Peaks: The Return, of course.
Yes, 4 days before she died. Yeah. But that just struck me as, wow,
incredible.
There's a story there. How did that happen, right? And then it just kept thinking about it. And at the time, I was developing a bunch of different projects. It was one of the things I was developing. And when they had already announced that Twin Peaks was coming back, I thought, you know what? This is going to be an easy one to get funded. I'll just go to Netflix or somebody, and they're going to want, I don't know, Jack, and I know Catherine. How about that? Great idea. Great. Okay, let's see if we can just get somebody to give me a bunch of money to make this movie. It'll be really interesting. And I couldn't get the right access to the right person that could make that decision. I'm not connected in Hollywood. I'm such an outsider in my own way. Almost everything I've done has been outside of the traditional things, except for getting hired as a voiceover person or as an actor. But as I gathered more and more information and found out more and more about Catherine, I became fascinated by this story. I think it's an amazing story. I've always been fascinated by the idea of the show must go on. And that always brought to my mind, the show must go on. Why? Why? Why must the show go on? Why do we get up every morning and brush our teeth and go out and do it again, especially if we're unhappy or in ill health or disappointed in work or in relationships? Why must the show go on? What is this compelling? Are we just afraid of dying? Is it just fear of death that makes us do things, that make people like Catherine, who can do 50 things where we could do 10, who's just engaged and just constantly creating and putting stuff out? Why must the show go on? That became an issue, not an issue, but it became an interest and a level of interest for me. And then I have an exceedingly large project that will follow, I know Catherine, I hope, called History of Cool. And History of Cool's first feature, we're actually calling I Know Catherine A History of Cool. And it's our first feature. History of Cool is based on the idea that whether you think you're cool or not, you have a lifetime of curating things that you think are cool. Everybody, no matter who, the biggest schlub in the world, right, knows what he thinks is cool in cars and music and clothes. Everybody has an opinion. And that opinion is unique, just as unique as your name and everything about you all together. That's you. And you should own that, and you should control that, and who has access to that, and who gets to see it. And the idea of History of Cool is to build a database of what real people think is cool and where to find it, and have it be all consumer facing. So you decide if you want other people to be able to contact you, or advertisers, or anybody to see your profile. You decide how much of you want to. You may say, Eric Burdon and the Animals, Don't Let Me Be Misunderstood, greatest rock and roll song of all time. That's your opinion, and that's a great opinion. Now, if people are looking for, is that a great song, you're going to come into that search that people are, you'll be one bit of information in that larger search. But if now I believe that's a great song, and I'm a jazz musician, and I have a child, and I have a law degree, or I have who you are, the more specific you are about who you are that has these opinions, the more you're going to come up in people's searches. And the more I could be able to search, great places to stay in London. I only want to know actors who like to walk. Let them tell me what great places to stay in London is, and then I'm going to go to walk through all the theaters. History of Cool is a qualified search engine that qualifies the information going in and how you search for it coming out. And it's not advertising driven. It's us wanting to share information driven. It's more of a cultural network than a social network. And it's a huge project. And I determined that before I could try and launch this huge project, I had a small amount of money from the sale of a house. Before I could launch that, I needed to learn about crowdfunding, and I needed to find the biggest audience I could. And I felt that of all the projects I was working on, once I got my David Lynch interview, which could have just been released by itself almost, it would have been a wonderful success. That to focus on that project, I Know Catherine, would teach me about crowdfunding, allow me to make this project, and maybe open some doors so that I could then move forward with History of Cool, which wants to do 1,000 Catherine-style documentaries and project. You know, it's a multiple, very complicated project, complex and many facets. So I decided to put everything that I had behind I Know Catherine, and it took about 7 months to build the team. I was extraordinarily lucky that Peter Dahm of Welcome to Twin Peaks stumbled on the video that I made to convince David that we should go ahead with the crowdfunding. That did convince David. I mean, he gave his approval to me to move forward with it. Peter became instrumental in creating the campaign and reaching Twin Peaks fans and a larger population as well. And that's all great. And I learned a lot, and it was amazing. And I warn everybody who wants to get into Kickstarter, if you're an artist, you're going to make those rewards really good. And it's going to be really time consuming and expensive to fulfill the rewards. And so you'll end up taking away maybe 40 cents on a dollar for what you raised to go toward your project, because it's so expensive to just communicate with people and we build some expensive and interesting things that are beautiful. And people were very patient and are patient with us. But I put an enormous amount of money, of my own money, into this project over the last 4 years. And some of our executive producers went above and beyond what they had initially come in with and helped us to get to where we are, which is very close to finishing. We have thousands of photos and videos that still have to be placed, but we've got an incredibly tight, incredibly beautiful, moving story. And to cap that, the answer, a long answer, I'm sorry again, it's changed me as a person. Forget about artist, not artist, anything else. Dealing with life and death and commitment and follow through and relationships and anger and pain and fear and worry and art. There's a line that Christopher Liam Moore, who was married to Bill Rausch, who is the artistic director of the Perelman Center in New York. It will, I think, be the largest repertory company in the US. It's at the site of the World Trade Center. It is yet to open. Okay. He was the artistic director at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, which at the moment still is the largest repertory company in North America, with a budget just under $50 million a year, right? 22 seasons Catherine did there. Yeah. This is great theater.
Big part of that.
22 seasons. And he says profound people change you in profound ways. And Catherine changed a lot of people. And it's really true. Living, I've never been a Christian, but if I had a book that told me how to live and what to believe in, and I every day read that book and it inspired me to know how to live, right? I'm sure that I would be well-versed and stronger if I believed in that book. Yeah. Not good, bad, or Christianity, or it could be Islam, it could be Judaism and Buddhism, whatever. If you follow away, well, every day I get up and I live with this profound person and all the profound people she impacted who needed to tell me their stories. We're talking about Pulitzer Prize-winning playwrights. We're talking about Academy Award-winning directors. We're talking about cinematographers, directors, actors, rabbis, people who are in and of themselves, many of them, professional storytellers, eloquent and excited and vibrant, all talking about Catherine and the impact that she had on their life and how that life was lived. And she's not a perfect person. That's clearly all through her flaws shine, but it is the being present.
Yeah.
It is being in life and the impact and all those people being present and in life when we interviewed them. It's been it's getting up and reading the Bible every day. It's getting up and remembering, yeah, I should be reaching. I should be taking those risks, and I should be working just a little bit harder. And why am I not taking that walk? Keep my wind up. You really want to sing, and you can't sing if you're smoking too many joints, man. What's the matter with you?
It's true. Are you talking to me personally there?
No, me. I'm right over here.
Well, listen, I mean, while we're talking about this, I want to take this moment to thank you for asking me to be a part of it. Because as you know, Catherine, she was a wonderful friend to me, especially when my mum died. And the fact that you asked me to be a part of something so special, involving so many people in her life, I thank you, Richard, because I really, she meant the world to me. She really did. I loved her very much. So thank you for allowing me. And the fact that it will probably be the only time on IMDb my name appears by David Lynch and Carl McLaughlin. So thanks for that too.
There you go. There you go. Well, I will say two things. I didn't pick you out of the blue. A lot of people knew you and knew how important you were to Catherine and how important the UK festival was as just a sort of a top-notch artistic venture in and of itself. The work that's there, something very different. I mean, I've only visited the UK festival and the American festival, and I was at the American festival twice. I believe in 2003, maybe, I think. Catherine was there that year. And then I went back in 2018, I guess, was the second to the last one, and I was there for that. And they're very, very different, and they're both gone, which is not understandable to me. It's outrageous and crazy, but not for my place to get into that brouhaha. But what I found at the UK festival is, and I get to experience it through the Double R clubs, and the cancer, Cabaret for Cancer, and just these wonderful group of incredibly talented and outrageous and warm people that you have.
Incredible people.
Yeah. Amazing people. So I get to follow that on Facebook and see all that's there, but I didn't pull your name out of a hat. A lot of people wanted me to interview you, and I didn't put you in the film because, we got to get the English people in. I put you in the film because your story is wonderful and you tell it in a beautiful way, and it's about Catherine, and it fits in with Charlotte, a story that Charlotte tells about the first time that the two of them arrived there, and so it kind of has a beautiful little dovetail. And no, you're welcome, and thank you for participating. And you did me 2 interviews. You came to Los Angeles.
I did get you 2. Yeah, I did London and Los Angeles. Yeah,
we had a good time both times.
Yeah, it was good fun. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed being a part of it very much. Thank you.
Well, I hope they like the result.
I mean, you've told Jack's story. We're telling Catherine's story. You are a natural storyteller. Who else's story would you like to tell?
It's a good question.
I mean, your own story is amazing. You have
I told the 7 Year Zigzag story, and that was great. I do have. I've always wanted to tell a road trip story, just about a particular road trip that I took. That would be interesting. There's a movie that I was writing. I got the idea, I think, when I was at Cal Arts. Something I really wanted to make. It's mentioned in 7 Year Zigzag. It's called The Doomsayer. It's about a hippie on the bum who thinks the end will come in 7 days, and all the ways he tries to say, wake up to the world, but no one listens. He can't raise the bread. Has to put, Anyway, so that's a possibility. I have 3 projects right now that, as I'm finishing Catherine and hoping that all of the big media companies are going to be beating down my door to try and get this project and offer me a 3-picture deal afterward or something. You got to have a couple of projects in your pocket. You got to be able to say, well, what about this? We could do this, right?
Yeah.
So one of the projects is The Doomsayer. I'd love to shoot it and update it to the 21st century. The other project is the pilot for History of Cool, which has a television component to it, which I think would be wonderful. And then another one that I can't really talk about because it's just such a really interesting idea. It's just it's easy to spot. I want to leave that one alone. Okay. And, you know, I've thought about it. If Catherine is a very, very unique film in the way that the story is told. It is reminiscent of Zigzag in some ways. Right. Because of the way I cut, I guess, and the way it's scored. And it's been an enormously long project, largely because of, to some extent because of money, because such a limited budget, I've really had to do it all myself. I can't really afford a full-time editor to keep everything organized. So I've got to, you know, when it gets out of sync, I'm the one that's putting it back in sync and finding things. I've got help, you know, and I've had assistance on and off with various things. We had a wonderful woman that helped us get all the rewards out and such. And some really good people after that. It occurs to me that because of Catherine and the way the story is told, that someone might approach me and say, we want you to do something really unique in telling the story of this person. And I would have to think about whether I wanted to commit another 4 or 5 years to telling somebody else's story. Not that this person particularly interests me, although I think it's interesting. The person, if I was describing that to you, I would say, yeah, somebody came to me and said, here, we're going to give you all the money you need. We want you to find a unique way to tell Mick Jagger's story, right? So, but it would be the next 4 or 5 years of my life to tell Mick Jagger's story. Do I want to go there? I don't know that I do. Yeah. So I'm not sure. It's, you know, there were 20 years between I Don't Know Jack and I Know Catherine, right? Yeah. Almost 20 years. I didn't direct or edit I Don't Know Jack. I executive produced it. I think I produced it. I would take that credit today if I were rewriting the credits. I would say that I produced it along with Donna and Jeff McConnell and some other people. Frankie had a piece of it. But my producer, my credit is the executive producer. I paid for it. It was out of my studio, and I made sure it went the way I wanted it to go. But Chris Levins had a free hand, as did Mike Wargo. There's a crazy story about that it's been picked up in some magazines about Frankie Wilson, who was in the movie, Eraserhead, was one of our producers, and she didn't like the cut that Chris was coming up with, so she stole all the master tapes. Yeah. Wow. So the movie that you see with I Don't Know Jack is the movie Chris Levins made because we couldn't cut it. We had just that output from the Avid. That was all we had. Right. We did a version later for, you know, for other markets, but yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, very interesting. I do have somebody's story that I would like to tell. Actually, the story I've always wanted to tell, you're not allowed to tell. I always wanted to tell Gene Kelly's story, but it's actually in his will, I think, that there will never be a biography of him, which was why there never happened. And Fred Astaire, neither of them wanted it, ever. So that's why there's never been one. But there is somebody I would love to tell the story, and I won't say it here, but I'll say it to you privately, but there is a Mulholland Drive link there as well. Really? Oh, one of my biggest icons. Yeah. Okay, so let's move away from I Know Catherine for the moment. Let's talk about your voiceover work, because let's face it, Richard, you have the most charismatic voice ever, and you do a lot of voiceover work, don't you? Do you think there is a different way in approaching and creating a character for voiceover than there is for acting, for on-screen acting?
Well, I think we're talking about apples and oranges here. If you're playing a role in a commercial, a voiceover commercial, let's say, but you're playing a character as a person, a character, a coach, or you're a dad, or you're the lawyer or the doctor, you're playing a role. It's the same thing as doing it on camera. If you're doing an animated series, it's the same thing. I mean, I do the same kind of work. I don't necessarily think too much about the walk of the character or the clothing if I know it's going to be animated. Yeah. But the same internal work, right? That work which I learned at CalArts. Your first question was about discipline in CalArts. What I learned there was how to break down a script and how to understand how to assist the author in telling a story. And that's the same work we do, whether it's Shakespeare or Dostoevsky or Ibsen or, you know, the Simpsons. It's the same stuff, or Transformers or whatever else. The promo work is different. The stuff where you're the announcer or you're doing promo, you're, you know, up next on ABC or whatever it is. That's very different. That's a different set of skills. And I think some of it has to be an understanding of marketing, an understanding of how they're selling this, of what they're doing and why. You know, good fortune in this area comes very cyclically. And that you have to prepare for in a different way. That you have to be very centered on the one objective, which shouldn't be ever commercial, right? Mm-hmm. If you're selling cars and the line is come down to the, you know, Saturday and Sunday, the sales on, save 50% on these things. If what you're selling is that discount, you might or might not get hired depending if they like your voice. Yeah. But if you're selling something else that not only are they going to save, the saving money is separate. This car is going to make them sexier or is going to make them feel safer about their kids, depending on the car that you're selling, right? You're talking to the emotion. I approach it that the copy carries the message. Mm. The voice tells you how to feel about the message. Our job is emotional because all I have to do is say the words and you hear them. And if it's a TV commercial, it'll probably be on the screen anyway. Yeah. So what we're really doing is communicating emotional need and relief and solutions and attitude, right? It's all about the attitude. And, you know, in terms of voice, you know, I think there's two components to that as well. There's a lifetime of staying up too late and smoking too many cigarettes for many decades, and you know, and singing and genetics, you know, just genetics, right? And then there's the part of how connected you are vocally and audially to your own emotions, right?
Yeah, definitely.
You know, how open that whole strip is. And that's hard to regulate. I think the reason so many of us as performers, I don't smoke tobacco anymore, although sometimes I wish I did. But the reason so many of us smoke is because I think nicotine regulates emotions. I think it allows you to just sort of sit on something that may be hard to deal with, but it just makes it easier to deal with. People, when they're stressed and nervous, want a cigarette. And after sex, you want a cigarette. It relaxes you, and it also floods you with kind of a little hit of pleasure. And unlike marijuana or, I never smoke anything else, but it's every time you take a puff, you get that little hit. That one puff, and it's like right there. It's not like smoke marijuana and a couple of minutes later you might be stoned. This is, oh, I just got that little injection I needed of nicotine to make me feel less or more comfortable with my own skin or something like that. Yeah. And I think it's to regulate emotions. I know a lot of great dancers. When I was at Cal Arts, one of my ways that I would relax is I would go over to the dance department where they would have these huge, you know, rooms with mirrors and wood floors, beautiful women and beautiful men, and somebody sitting on an old piano playing for them. So you got live music and a show. I could just like relax. You know, it was a great place to relax. It always shocked me how many of these young dancers would grab a cigarette as soon as they came off the dance floor. Like, what the fuck? But it's because they're actors with their bodies. They're doing their job right. They're not just executing a visual move. They are emoting something at that same time. How do you regulate that emotion? You know, when you come off a set or you come off a heavy scene, what do you want? You want to tamp it down. Yeah. You know? So.
Where does your music, I mean, you're sat at your piano right now, aren't you?
I am.
I have also sat at your piano with you and had a little thing. But where does your music come into all your work? I mean, it's your big love, isn't it? Give us a tune, Rich.
You want a tune, did you say?
I want a tune.
What tune is a good question to play? Hey, Jane, what tune should I play for me? You're still with us?
You're still with us, Jane?
She's there. How about What's It Like? Yeah. Really? Okay.
That's a very happy one.
Jane is executive producer, one of the executive producers on I Know Catherine the Log Lady. She's also our stage manager. She's about 300 miles away, 250 miles away in Sacramento, and will sit with me on Zoom as I'm editing often. And, you know, when we say we need this, she'll run and get it online for us. Really just been, you know, we've been really, really lucky. We've had some great people helping, and Jane has been just stalwart. And I want to just shout out to Jenny Sullivan too, our producer, who's just a really, you know, very, very talented producer, very talented theater director, had a very good career as an actress. She made a movie that Catherine produced with John Ritter, who was a big sitcom actor here from Three's Company. David Lynch did the makeup for the you'll see all this in the movie, Catherine. David Lynch did the makeup after the car crash when John Ritter's been all bloodied up, and Jenny is in that and lovely and beautiful, and has been really just essential to connect us to the important people in Catherine's life, some of whom she didn't know that well. You know, Catherine separated a lot of stuff. We have a theme. I'm not sure that it's... We wanted What's It Like, right? So there's What's It Like as a... What's it like to be with you, gazing at the moon? What's it like to wipe away a lazy afternoon? And what's it like to worry I might say too much too soon? And what's it like to dance until dawn and to find our favorite tune? What's it like to be in love with you? What's it like to dream that it's true, that you do, you love me too? What's it like? What's it like to kiss you in the pouring rain? And what's it like to miss you and know I'm gonna see you again? What's it like to dream by your side till morning's end? What's it like to face a new day as your lover and your friend? What's it like to be in love with you? Maybe I already know. What's it like to dream that it's true, that you do, you love me too? What's it like? To fondly remember the moment that we met. And what's it like to make the kinds of new memories that we'll never forget? And what's it like to live a life of love with no regret? And what's it like to feel in our hearts that we ain't seen nothing yet? Or not yet. What's it like to be in love with you? Maybe I already know. What's it like to dream that it's true, baby, that you do, you love me too, and I love you. What's it like?
That's great, Richard. Oh, I love that. That's really lovely. Thank you so much. I miss sitting at your piano. I can't wait to come back. We're not allowed to come back yet. They don't like us from the UK at the moment. But once I'm back in LA, we must have another little sing-song at your piano.
Oh, please, please, please. Yes.
Well, that's all the questions I have for you today, my darling. Thank you so much.
I have a question for you. Do I get to, before you thank me, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Yes. What's next for Lindsey?
You ask an interesting question, Mr. Green. I am working on some film projects at the moment, which are very exciting. I have a beautiful friend who's a cinematographer and a producer. His name is Serge Teulon, and we are working on some exciting projects at the moment. We're going to be starting a film company, and there's lots of ideas that we have. So we're becoming a bit of a duo in the film world, and we're going to hopefully we're going to make some interesting projects and make a few changes to the world is our sort of goal. So I'm doing that, and I'm sort of doing lots of writing at the moment as well. I'm doing more of these interviews, of course, because I love doing this. And the reason I started doing them on my blog was actually I sort of had an epiphany that I was surrounded by such amazing people every single day in my life as colleagues and friends, you know, and I just thought, you know what, people kind of tend to concentrate on actors and interviews, but actually there's a whole scope of people who make projects happen, and I wanted to kind of give a platform to those people. So I've interviewed my friend Serge that I just mentioned. I interviewed him. He's a cinematographer. You know, I've interviewed my friend Gareth, who's a stills photographer, and now I'm sort of taking it to the next step, and I'm putting it on my YouTube channel as well and doing these Zoom interviews. So that's kind of what I'm up to at the moment. Lots of different things.
Well, any assistance that anybody that I know can give you in the film projects that you have, whether it's access or just feedback, I'm happy to support it. I really think everybody that you introduced me to has just been of exceptional enthusiasm, quality, and taste, and I just wish you the best, and I thank you for letting me talk about myself.
Oh no, I always like to do it. You're so interesting, and your stories are so interesting. And even when we're together and we have a coffee or whatever, I love just sitting and listening to your stories, you know. And I mean, when I move to LA, because let's hope that's still going to happen, you won't be able to get rid of me. You'll be sick of me. So
hey, out at the studio, make shows here. We got a big spot.
Yeah, I'd love to. I mean, that's my goal, isn't it, to get over there so permanently. So I miss it. I miss LA a lot. But hopefully I'll be over soon. Well, thank you very much, my darling. This has been an absolute pleasure. Lovely to see your lovely face. And I guess we'll speak very, very soon. Thank you, Richard.
Yeah, stay safe.
Bye, darling.
Bye.